And now on the line is Janie Lazar. Janie is the chair of End of Life Ireland. Janie, welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much, Darren. It's good to be here.
Okay, Janie, today is only my second interview with your organisation. Around 6 months ago, I interviewed your colleague Justin McKenna on this programme. As it has been 6 months since my last interview with Justin, can you remind our listeners, Janie, as to who End of Life Ireland are? And can you tell me a bit about how you personally got involved in this line of work?
Most certainly, it's quite simple, really. The group we're an eclectic group of people, all of whom have had either some illness ourselves, in many cases very serious, or have lost people close to us who have had terminal or life-limiting conditions. And that was really, I suppose, the basis on which we came together, knowing that there would be an Oireachtas committee set up to look at this issue. So since you first spoke to Justin, a lot has indeed happened. The Oireachtas committee is now up and running. It's an all-party, time-bound committee. And their first public meeting was on the 13th of June. So their period, it's an all-party committee, their period for exploring this issue, what assisted dying is in Ireland and how it might operate, that body of work will conclude on the 13th of March of next year.
Okay, that's the main reason I got in touch with you, to talk about this Oireachtas committee. It comes, I believe, from the Dying with Dignity bill. Can you tell me who is sitting on this committee, Janie?
Michael Healy-Rae is chair of this committee. The others are Saoirse Clarke from Sinn Féin, Patrick Costello, Greens, Pardaly, Sinn Féin again, two from Fine Gael, Alan Farrell and Emma Higgins, Gina Kenny, who proposed the bill, People Before Profit, John Lahart, Fianna Fáil, and Robert Troy, Fianna Fáil. So they're the TDs. And then there are four senators, Annie Hoey, Labour, Ronan Mullen, Independent, Fiona O'Loughlin, Fianna Fáil, and Lynn Ruane, Independent again. So a balanced committee, and I suppose that's important because if everyone were either in favour or all against, you probably wouldn't get the fair debate that is needed.
Yeah, okay. So the committee's going to next March. After next March, I believe they'll issue a report. Would there be a need, Janie, for a referendum on this issue of assisted dying to be brought in, or could it be brought in through the Oireachtas?
It's one of those things. Listeners may recall the case, Murray Fleming's landmark case. Murray sadly died in 2013, so this year marks the 10-year anniversary of her death. Murray took her case first to the High Court and then the Supreme Court. And whilst the Supreme Court ruled that there was no constitutional right to die, they did rule that the Oireachtas could legislate. And what that means in real terms is that there is no need for a referendum.
I think that's very interesting news. It's just coming back to me now because Tom Curran said to me this before, and Justin McKenna as well. Yeah, so I think it'd be great because if it could go through the Oireachtas, because the process will be a lot faster, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be faster, and it's one of those things. Depending on how the discussion goes, and I was in the door at the public meetings this morning, listening to the first stages. They look at the constitutional and the legal side. Listening to the debate there was a suggestion that it perhaps should go to a referendum. Personally, I just think that's a delaying tactic. And, we've waited 10 years for this to happen. We now have the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act now in operation. So there is support for people and their families to ensure that the right decisions are being made by patients who may feel that they need an outside party to help them through making decisions that determine what care they get, and decisions, if this legislation were in effect, what decisions they might make around it. The important thing is that even if legislation were in place, even if somebody applied and were deemed eligible, even if they were able to avail of this, right up until the day that they would choose to have an assisted death, somebody can still choose not to exert that right, that choice. So there are extensive safeguards throughout the world.
Mm. And I think Tom Corrin was telling me, I interviewed him twice over the last few years. He was telling me that he doesn't believe personally in his organisation. I think that having, for example, a mental illness should be kind of a reason why people should would be allowed to have an assisted death. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think this is where we have to look to the practice and the research and the experience in other countries. The view, if you like, that somebody who is mentally ill isn't able to make a choice is one that is deeply discussed and debated. And the Institute of Psychiatrists here, for example, feel that anybody who has who let's say is depressed can be treated. And that's not always the case. And I think we really do have to look to medical, if you like, medical experience elsewhere. And, anybody who has come face to face with their own mortality and is dealing with the prospect of death has already thought about this a great deal. Mm. So anybody in that position would understandably, yes, I mean, goodness, almost every dying person that I've ever spoken to really wanted to live. Mm. But I think I'm not an expert, but clinical depression is something else. And if there is somebody who has been through every possible treatment for, let's call it mental illness, and this is what they, with their loved ones, have decided is the right course of action, which has happened in other countries, then I think it's for the clinicians and the experts to decide once they have listened to the person themselves.
Mm. And on the overall issue, Tom told me on an interview last time a couple of years ago, he uses the term voluntary, I think he said voluntary euthanasia. What terms do you use?
We use voluntary assisted dying, and we prefer to use the term assisted dying because suicide has very different connotations. And I think particularly for people who have lost a loved one through suicide, then I think it can be quite upsetting. If somebody is dying and they have reached the point where either physically or mentally they can bear no more, the question I always have for somebody is, why would you unnecessarily prolong somebody's death if they are ready to go?
Okay, Janie, I won't keep it much longer. There's been, I understand, at least a couple of opinion polls in the last couple of years, and seemingly the majority of people agree with legislation on this, don't they?
Yes, they do indeed. And I think, excuse me, if anyone were to ask any of their friends, just in broad principle, assuming all of the safeguards were in place and that if you like, it was overseen and all of the, as I say, the safeguards were there, would you support somebody that you love if this was their decision? Everyone I've spoken to says yes. And this is really what we want. It's up to an individual to make that choice for themselves. And this is why I suppose we're holding the event tomorrow in Galway. We've been in other towns around the country. So tomorrow, or depending on when the interview goes out, it will be Wednesday the 21st of June in the Ardlawn Hotel in Galway. And we'll be running other events around the country just so that people can hear, maybe ask questions, they may have concerns, and just to get the conversation going, because nobody likes to even think about death, let alone talk about it. And yet it's something we should do when we're well, when we're healthy, so that we can have just a reasonable discussion without, how can I say it? When something happens in our lives, it's a very emotional time. But for something like legislation, I think what we need to do is have these discussions away from any personal situations so that we can look at it from a logical point of view. And people would never have judged somebody, or people tend not to judge other people for their decisions, whether it's who you marry, who you live with, whether or not you want children, whether you don't. And I think death is something else. The manner in which you die is important. And the most important opinion of all is the person who is facing that. So I would always support somebody else, even if it weren't my choice, something that I would opt for myself. And that's really, we want those discussions.
Okay, End of Life Ireland are active on social media, and I saw that you have a video on your YouTube channel with the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Can you tell me a bit about that, Janie?
Yes, indeed. I mean, Desmond Tutu is no longer with us, but, as a religious man, if you like, he just felt that nobody should suffer unnecessarily. And that was why he put his voice to make a video for one of the UK charities who kindly allowed us to use it. But he wanted to be afforded that choice and for people to show compassion. I don't like to always compare us, if you like, humans and animals, but we're all sentient beings. And nobody would want to see a human being or an animal in pain. And I think that's where Desmond Tutu was coming from as well. It is a kind choice. Why would you suffer unnecessarily?
Okay, Janie, thanks for the update and for telling me and our listeners today on Near FM a bit about your story and your beliefs. And I'll come back to you in End of Life Ireland for another interview later on in the year, okay?
That's lovely. Anyone can keep up to date with us on Twitter, on Facebook, and also they can look to endoflifeisland.ie for more information. And also the doctors. They're a small group of doctors who support this issue, and their website is MAID, as in www.maid.ie, and that stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. And the doctors will be with us at the meeting tomorrow, as well as Tom.